Grüß, willkommen in einem meiner Folgens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 30 of my figure gaming video series. In this video I'll be covering 15mm Napoleonic basing styles. I've previously covered the size of 15mm Napoleonic bases, so apart from providing a quick recap of this, my main objective is to cover the different ways gamers base their Napoleonic figures. This is more focused on providing ideas for basing Napoleonic figures than discussing rule mechanics or how to base figures. A quick recap on the most universal base sizes used by gamers. Note in countries which use imperial measures, the conversion will not be exact, but following a similar sizing system. Saying that, there is an astounding variability in base sizes for Napoleonics, which are all valid and optimal for the rules they're designed for, but this gives you a guide which allows you to use almost any set of rules, even if some minor house rules are also required. In summary, you can't go wrong with these sizes. But an equally valid statement is, are these the best sizes to make your force mix look good? As you may be aware, it's all about looking good. Looking good is a surprisingly powerful motivator. While this is clearly a static diorama, it looks very good, and players, in the most part, wish to duplicate this in the game. Yes, the game is the key reason why you're gaming, but while gaming you want the game to look good because, quite frankly, it motivates you to play. I'm originally a board gamer, and while I enjoy board games, the only real driver with a board game is to win in a game. This takes a certain type of abstract mindset, which few people can achieve for any length of time. To expand the hobby, you need to attract people who are less interested in abstract thought processes and more in the wow effect. As I used to say in the selling game, you may be selling a sausage, but what people often buy is the sizzle. This shows some standard based line infantry on what appears to be a 4cm by 2cm deep base. The point, which is very noticeable, is the base, both its thickness and the diorama on top of it. An often neglected part of Napoleonic is the basing. I think this looks really nice, with a rocky base and with clumps of grass. The thickness is possibly the result of the figure's base being moulded into the base. I have no idea how this is being done, but another major issue is, how do you hide the metal base the figure is on when you base it on a base? This shows another good example of reasonably standard bases. Again, possibly 4cm wide, 3cm deep for cavalry, and 4cm deep for the commander. The basing is simpler, but once again, the figure's bases metal bases are hidden, and this makes the base look a lot better. These bases are simple, single tone, no brushes or rocks. While totally functional and on the correct playing area would still look rather nice, it lacks the sizzle of the previous image. A quick note, this shows another common basing system, 4 figures on a smaller square base, which allows for more flexibility in formation width and gives you a nice mass effect. Figures using this basing strategy could use other rules, but increasingly rules which favour larger bases are becoming more popular, less space to move, I expect. Nonetheless, this basing scheme, which typically is, well for me, 2cm wide, 3cm deep, is the one that I'm most excited about in terms of Napoleonics, although I still have standard UK-based force mixes as well. This shows a close-up of the base system, or a base system. Each base is probably a 3cm square, could be a 2cm square, it's difficult to say. This shows how the metal base is hidden in more detail. You'll notice a small part of the metal base is visible in the figure on the corner at the front. The player covers the base with diorama, which covers the base, which is the most common way of hiding the figure's metal base. Nonetheless, as I will cover at the end of the video, the idea of an almost square base does have a lot of merit as well, and that happens to be another course of action I'm going down with for different figures, not specifically Napoleonics. This shows yet another basing system. I'm guessing this is 3cm wide, 2 ranks deep. These bases are basically 3cm squares. It could be a 4cm square, but I doubt it. The bases look good, lots of diorama, and those damn metal bases are nicely hidden. Fully square bases do offer an interesting advantage, as they allow players to make their base into a diorama. Older rules were all about placing as many tightly packed figures on the smallest possible base, but this minimises the ability of players to add any sizzle to their bases. Nonetheless, older systems were designed for you to form up formations, which could form line, column, square, and so as a result they tended to be rectangular and as small as possible. More modern rules or higher scale rules don't normally need you to do this, so the larger bases, which are square with more diorama on it, becomes more viable. Here is yet another picture of the same battlefield. I do like these bases. I expect the figures metal bases are hidden by the use of resin or something similar in this case. Now we are moving to what appears to be a 4 centimeter square base, probably deeper than 4, maybe 6 centimeter, but nonetheless it has 4 ranks, which is a lot of ranks for a unit. It's also possible the bases are maybe less than that, 3 centimeters deep with 2 ranks each, and there are actually 2 bases here, although I can't really see that. But if it was a 4 centimeter wide, let's say 6 centimeter deep base, this has a very nice massed effect. The downside is you need to paint a lot of figures to populate your base. A typical set of rules require each side to field about 50 elements, so if 30 were line infantry, you'd need to paint up 640 figures. This is a lot of figures to paint. I suspect this would only be viable for rules which require a lot less bases. Here is another example of a 4 centimeter wide base, but the bases are deeper, allowing for more diorama, as I would, deeper than you would normally have, as well as the figures being offset from each other. This looks very nice, but the question is, will the rules accommodate it? Rules such as DBN have no issues, but for other rules I'm uncertain. I suspect rules where each base represents a full battalion or regiment will be able to adopt this increased depth easily, but rules where the base represents a company may have more difficulty. A battalion in column could be 4 elements deep, so the battalion size is 4 centimeters wide and 12 centimeters deep. Historically, this may not be an issue, but the rules mechanics may cause some issues, or perhaps not. You'd have to look at the rules. Here is another interesting example. First, the basing. This is clearly a resin base, which hides the metal base, or the figure's metal base, nicely. While I'm not too keen about the glossy effect, ignoring that, this looks really nice. However, the key factor is the base size, which looks like a square, possibly 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters. The cavalry are in 2 ranks, which is not very common. Does look good, but it would certainly be rather crowded. This is an example of the additional flexibility a gamer has when they're dealing with possibly a larger or a square base. Now I'm going to quickly flip into micro armor, which is probably what I'm most familiar with. While the 6mm micro armor world also possesses a wide range of different base sizes, the standard today is very much a 3 centimeter square, or if the figure is longer than 3 centimeters, the depth is increased to accommodate the figure. Like Napoleonics, the micro armor world started out by wanting to put the most figures on the smallest possible base. The base was simply about moving the figures, and that was its main priority. As the hobby has developed, the base size has become a square and also increased in size, with a lot more real estate required to accommodate the figures and also other diorama effects, as you can see here. I think this has occurred because the hobby has moved to World War II from Cold War. And in World War II, towed artillery and infantry are much more common. When you base infantry or artillery, you have no choice but to create a mini diorama, so why not go all out? When this change in attitude occurred, it did affect some of the rules, but not a great deal. Corps Commander uses base widths of 2 centimeters for elements of 6 strength points or less, and 3 centimeters for 7 to 9 strength points. When players adopt the more common width of 3 centimeters, this caused some minor issue, which was accommodated by allowing elements in the rear to be considered as the front line to achieve the optimum density of 3 strength points per centimeter. Can the same be achieved with Napoleonics? And maybe this is a good direction to move down. I certainly am considering that at the present moment. Let's investigate if this is a worthy objective, that is, trying to go for bigger bases, more diorama. What you see here is what looks like static diorama, but it's not. These are figures on movable bases which are designed to play a game, and it looks really good. Here is a close-up. You may be able to see the gaps between the bases. These are gaming elements indeed, using 3 centimeters or 4 centimeter wide bases. These look magnificent and are a worthy objective for any gamer to aim for, if you wish to go down to this level of detail. When we look from the top, we now see the bases are rather deep, allowing for an impressive amount of diorama. The bases look like they're probably 4 centimeters deep, as well as being made of metal so they remain very thin. The metal bases are hidden with flock, static grass and small brushes. I prefer 2mm thick MDF bases, so I'll not go down the metal path, but the diorama is great, and for those players who do go down the metal path, this is what you can achieve, and it's certainly something worthy to achieve. What we see here is not a single base. This shows the effect of mass troops, which also look great. My gaming comrade made a comment. There are two paths you can go down. The diorama path, which requires great figures, good painting skill, and a major focus on the diorama on the base, and the mass effect, which requires a lot of figures packed together and with enough effort to make the bases to look good and to hide the metal bases of the figures, but allowing no room to do anything else sexy. Both are viable courses of action which you can consider doing. This shows a base with 6mm Napoleonic figures on it. I expect it's 6 cm wide by 4 cm deep and is designed for a big base set of rules such as bitchute. In the 6mm world, the technique of micro armor are more common, with a greater focus on the base diorama. This is expected as the figures are smaller and often less detailed, so you need to make the base look good. This shows a more extreme example. In this case, I'm guessing a 6 cm square base. What we have here is an impressive work of diorama, as well as being a useful base for a set of rules. At 6 cm square bases, you are probably dealing with a maximum force mix of 12 to 24 elements per side, which is still a massive army, but viable. I like this idea. It has merit. However, with a base this large, I expect some form of strength point tracking is required, which I tend to dislike, but it's not a dropper. It's not something to stop me going down this path if I wanted to go down it. This shows an even better example what can be achieved with this 6 cm square system. However, these are all what I call big base rules, which I'll cover in more detail in another video. The objective is to show what kind of effect can be achieved if you so desire. In conclusion, the choice seems to be between mass troops or diorama, and both have their merits and are really a player choice. But assuming both uses an unusually deep base, how can we accommodate this with existing rules? The simplest solution is to use a system currently used for a range of rules. All bases are 4 cm wide, with artillery on a 4 cm deep base and infantry cavalry on a 3 cm deep base. DBN and a number of other rules follow this system, and this may be the safest strategy. Heck, you may even be able to place the infantry and cavalry on 4 cm square, and so everything can be square. Infantry could be placed either 2 deep or 1 deep with diorama. Artillery and cavalry remain as probably they currently are. This is probably the simplest, easiest and safest strategy, which gives you a basing system that still works with older rules as well as new rules and allows you sufficient real estate to put nice diorama on your bases. So, in conclusion, probably the most ambitious strategy is this. To get more real estate, we need larger bases. We cannot alter the base width without changing the ground scale of the rules we're using, so the additional real estate must come from the depth. If the width is 4 cm, a depth of 4 cm is probably what we would try and aim for. All gamers already do this with artillery, as an artillery base basically is a piece of diorama which contains crew, guns, perhaps a limber, and piles of cannonballs or similar. The difference is all figures are now based in the same manner. Obviously some figures, such as horse artillery crew, may need a deeper base, but these are not actually used in the game and are typically just pure bling. One advantage of using a common square base is it allows players to use a movement tray, allowing them to use their bases for, let's say, a big base set of rules, as well as an element base set of rules. It's also a neat way of keeping track of casualties. Just to note, this shows a movement tray with slots for each element. I now just use a single tray which can accommodate all the elements I need. Having the 5mm dividers between elements cause element size issues or base sizes. I don't have these dividers in between. It's just a single tray that can fit all the elements I need with the correct size. I'm uncertain which way the 15mm Napoleonic hobby will move in the future, but I suspect there'll be an increased focus on larger bases, allowing for more diorama or even more mass figures, as has occurred with 6mm. This depends greatly on the rules being used and I suspect the fashion. And so we come to an end of episode 30 of my figure gaming hobby series of videos, in this case covering Napoleonic figure basing styles. Alle guten Dinge, kommen zu einem Ende.